So, Michael Carrick is the chosen one as United prepare for the Manchester derby following another period of discomfort in the north-west. We are dissecting every inch of another turbulent chapter for Ineos and much more. Get the kettle on. It's your Theatre of Red.
In my first 3 games in charge, with 2 victories and 1 draw, I said to you, the storm is coming. Today, after this disaster season, I want to tell you, the good days are coming.
Despite Ruben Amorim's end-of-season comments, the man is no longer charged with leading Manchester United. And as a football club, we are once more encountering issues on and off the field. Now, as you know, listener, times change quickly, and there is every possibility that by the time you are listening to this particular podcast, Michael Carrick will have been installed as our latest interim head coach ahead of the weekend's Manchester derby. And that is, of course, before a trip to London to face Arsenal. I think it is fair to say that despite the sense of joy in seeing a familiar face return to Old Trafford, there are easier circumstances that he could have prepared for. Wouldn't you say so, Mr. Jamie Jackson?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, it's the old thing, innit? Most managers or caretakers, in this case interims, they don't often walk into a club that's, on the up. It's usually because the results have gone south, etc. But yeah, I mean, this is a bit of I would say this is a particular, even by Manchester United standards, since Ferguson retired in May, that last season of his, even by the standards of what's followed in the last 12 or 13 years, this is a particular pickle.
A particular pickle. And I tell you, if Carrick does come in and somehow manages to formulate a winning strategy out of those 2 games, then they can start building the statue already. Maybe one day. It seems like all we do is chat about the never-ending plague of calamity at the football club and a plethora of questionable decisions made by a collection of individuals have done anything but endear themselves to the United faithful, sir. Before we begin chatting about the return of Michael, Darren Fletcher came for 2 games. And yes, although the results were not what he would have wanted, it's fair to say, the man offered further insight into the uncertainty at the boardroom level, highlighting how he was unaware of what was actually going on after the Brighton fixture. But he did provide a vocal show of support for the quality within the squad, focused on their capabilities of qualifying for the Champions League, because as we know, despite the Jekyll and Hyde that we are accustomed to, there is plenty of the season remaining, and much can be achieved in the league in response to last season's 15th-place finish. Saying that, Jamie, he mirrored quite a bit of what Ruben was stating about the necessity for players to stand up and show the world that not only do they want to play for Manchester United, but that they also deserve to be playing for Manchester United. I know it was a limited time that he spent in this interim role, and the turnaround from that revealing press conference following the draw at Ellen Road was swift. But what have you made about the nature of events at the club over the past 9 days and the fact that despite plans being drafted for this unified vision towards Project 150, that the club once again finds itself in turmoil so soon into another managerial reign?
Yeah, I mean, you characterise it perfectly. When United got knocked out by Brighton, wasn't it, the FA Cup? I think I just used the word turmoil then, Sean. I used the word, the season's in tatters, basically. But you are right what you say about the league. So what have I made of the last sort of, whatever it is now, 9 days, isn't it? I think since sort of 8 days since he got sacked anyway. Well, it's a bit of a farce, really, I've got to say, the whole thing. And because, again, what you mentioned there in your question, this whole project thing about let's get, the team back to where it can challenge for the title. That's 2028, is it? Is that correct? Was that the season? I can't remember exactly. The project, whatever it is, that Barada and Wilcox are overseeing, that they've stated basically that you buy that season. I think it is 27-28, whatever the 150th anniversary is of United's founding. Anyway, well, I mean, you tell me, or listeners tell us if you think that's realistic. Now, I would say no. I actually thought it was unrealistic at the time, but at least ambitious, right? I get that. That's good. Don't get me wrong. I like ambition in anything, because you won't get anywhere at all if you think small. But it's a bit of a mess. I've got a question for you. A rhetorical one, but you're welcome to answer, but I'll follow it up myself first. Could Wilcox did Wilcox have to pull the plug on Amorim after the Ellen Road performance, and actually the one on the Friday previewing that game, when he sort of refused to answer my questions about, well, he answered it in the end by saying you're very, very smart about the whole why you're only realizing now that there's no budget for sort of top players for 3-4-3. Has Wilcox spoken to you, or have you had a chat about budgetary concerns? Did he have to pull the plug after all that? Maybe yes. And the reason why I'm saying this is because his job is for the best of the team, right? Of course it is, for the best of the club. I don't see how sacking a manager, okay, there's lines, and I get all that, but there's really a cuter way of dealing with this, whereby he would have stayed in place. Okay, you might not have beaten Brighton, but you would have a heck of a better chance, and you might have beaten Burnley as well, so the draw did both games. Instead, he's pulled the plug on a guy, actually, who seemed to have been, obviously raised you 10 or 11 places from last season where you finished, as he should be doing, by the way, because of the investment. But he's basically doing what was on, the brochure. His thing was, or what he was told, was European football. And as you say, Champions League is not out of the question in this, especially when there's 5 places. I think it'll be again, right? Because of the coefficient or however they decide this. So I would say it's a bit of a farce, because I think Wilcox, could have done better. Now, the only thing I don't know for sure is whether Ratcliffe, because that's really who runs the club, has said to him, now you've got to get rid of this guy. But, Barada and Wilcox are intertwined, because Barada was obviously appointed Wilcox, and those two knew each other, and worked together at City. That's where the whole connection comes from. So, if I'm being honest, I actually think Ineos at the moment have made the club weaker, worse than before they came in, and it wasn't a particularly best in class structure. And whenever I talk about Manchester United, this is over the years, I always like to be, about any situation, of course, sort of glass half full. So what I would go on to say now is, okay, there's got to be a darkest point before the dawn of, a new age for United, when actually everything that all the fans listen to this, yourself being a fan, my son being a fan, and me, it's one reports them, although I'm not a fan on United, where actually, you know what, they finished 4th, they finished 3rd, and then the next season, wow, coming into May, they're 2 points in the lead, or 2 points behind, the top, and they've got a proper chance, and then you're established again. That has to happen. So maybe Amorim, the whole Amorim hiring 3-4-3, is it going to work? No, not really. Dan Ashworth stands up to Ratcliffe, says, I don't think this is the right guy. Okay, off you go for Ashworth. All this sort of stuff. And then you get to the Amorim sacking. Maybe this is the bleakest point. I'm trying to be positive. The only reason why I'm not so much is because of all those other situations I just mentioned. Then Ashworth, the Ten Hag thing, yes. When they were going to sack him before the FA Cup, and interviewed loads of people. Tuchel sort of turned him down in Monaco, and so he survived. I'm just, I would say that if Carrick comes in now, when Carrick comes in now, I don't want this to happen, but imagine if from here you end up, I don't know, 10th, so out of the European, even the Europa Conference places. Everyone, including me, maybe you should, I don't want to speak for you, will turn around and say, why did they sack Amorim? You've not done the best for the team. And also, just my last point, this is taken now, let's say, because I got wind of it on Sunday driving back for the Brighton game, that Carrick was, after the interview process, Carrick was a favourite, probably going to be appointed. Well, to that point, it was a week since Amorim was sacked. He was actually sacked on the Sunday night, but it came out on the Monday, so it's actually 8 days. Did it really need to take a week? Well, it probably does if you haven't got a plan in case this happens, and that's not good planning, right?
No, I agree. I agree with nearly everything you've said. It is obviously 2028, I didn't want to be interrupting you when you were speaking. It is 2028. Drawing on the second thing you're saying, do I think that he had to sack him? I think if you look at it, following the chain of events that occurred that led to the comments that happened at Elland Road,
yes,
in my opinion, deliberately made his position untenable, because I think in any position, in any sort of career, in any walk of life, if you speak about your hierarchy like that in public, it's very difficult to imagine them going back to a normal 9 to 5 and that relationships are there. Yeah. But what I would say about it, Jamie, is you have to look at the significance of the events that occurred prior to that. You made reference, and it was something I was going to speak to you about. You made reference to the comments that you put towards him about the lack of transfer funding that was available. We obviously now know that there was a nature of several conversations that occurred. Promises that were given to Ruben Amorim were maybe backtracked on. And the ideal that we're going to build upon your vision and we're going to bring in the type of footballers that you need to be able to make this work. And then ultimately, we know that didn't occur in the background. And instead, Wilcox starts leading towards the ideas that Amram needs to be more tactically flexible.
Yes.
So I think a breakdown in communications, and I think maybe failing to deliver on promises that were previously agreed, is obviously what led to this public outburst from Amram, which ultimately made the position untenable. And I think from that point, he did have to be sacked, even though I wouldn't have agreed with it. Naturally, when we look at it now, we all hope that Carrick can hit the ground running, and that his playing reputation is going to lead to an immediate respect and a willingness to comply inside in the dressing room. There is a growing concern about the micromanagement that is occurring above him, with many people questioning the suitability of Wilcox and also of Omar Barada. And you look at this, and such is the nature of the discontent that we saw the announcement from the 1958 about the planned protest before Fulham, the calls for the vote of no confidence in the ownership, Barada, Wilcox, citing that the club is turning into a circus. So given what appears to be a personal reaction and a response from Wilcox, as I've said, which is following calculated post-match comments from Amram, I think it's very difficult to establish how we are witnessing a best-in-class framework when such decisions can be taken without having a suitable contingency plan ready to unfold. And that leads into what you're saying about getting word coming back from Brighton that Carrick was going to come in. Do I think it should have taken a week? No, absolutely not. But then that further leads back into the line of thinking that maybe we're not dealing with a best-in-class setup and there was no contingency plan lined up. I mean, for the love of God, Jamie, you've just been knocked out of the FA Cup and then you don't return to training until Wednesday ahead of the bloody derby. And furthermore, as you reported, funds are also being allocated to an interim coach to purchase players ahead of a permanent appointment in the summer. It just all reads and sounds very amateurish and lacking the distinguished touch that you would expect for a Manchester United hierarchy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you actually hit the nail on the head. When I said, should he have sacked him, really what I should refer to is what you did. Should he have really gone into that meeting on the Friday with Amrin and done all the stuff you just sort of said, then look, you're going to have to be more tactical, flexible, you know, because that then, as you basically said, predicated everything else. I mean, listen, you're right. What it strikes me as, on the one hand, you could say nothing, and this includes on my side of the fence. Don't worry, I'm not bigging myself up. I'm just a humble reporter, but nothing prepares you for, managing Manchester United, running it as an executive, and or reporting on it. It's a complete one-off, and it takes a bit. So what I'm saying is, this lot, Ineos, they're sort of learning. So on the one hand, you can say, right, you can't prepare yourself for it. But on the other hand, there should be certain practices which, it doesn't matter if it's Manchester United or the dog and duck, like having a contingency plan if your manager gets sacked, in place. You can't really excuse. And it just, it's interesting about Barada, for example. I know why they hired him or what their thinking was, which you can all guess. He was part of the City machine. But, I also cover Manchester City and the Manchester Football Correspondent, The Guardian. The sort of three people who run that club, or who ran it before Begiristain, 4 people before Begiristain left, is Al Mubarak, the chairman, right? And he's sort of quite hands-off, but he's a smart cookie. Then you've got Ferran Soriano. You've got Cheeky Begiristain, or now Hugo Viana, and obviously Pep. Barada, he wasn't, for 2020, he was the chief football officer, so he then became more of a football person, on the football transfers, etc., but he wasn't running City. And I know it's easy to sit here and say this now, but we're just talking about the evidence, the facts, aren't we? There's been 2 or 3 major missteps now. The Ten Hag thing, shall we sack him? No, he won't. But in broad daylight, we'll interview everyone, and then sort of decide not to. The Dan Ashworth thing, and now this with Amarin. They've got to get this right now. That's why I said about the Carrick thing. If you end up 10th under him or whatever it be, out of the European place, put it that way, whatever that is it 8th or something? I don't know. Then what? Then it's on to, right, we're going to get a permanent manager. And the other thing is, actually, to flip that around, if Carrick gets Champions League football right, I know it's a big if, but if he does, will they sack him? You know what I mean? Because then what you're into is, well, all right, we understand maybe why you've sacked him, because you don't think he's good enough to get you the title. But what happens if the next person? So it's all a bit of a mess. In the end, they have to live or die by these decisions. And I just wonder, I don't know Ratcliffe at all, but he's sort of 2-3 times now been made to look a bit of a chump. And I wrote this in a piece last week. And it's the three instances I mentioned: the Ashworth thing, the Ten Hag thing, and now this with Amarin. I'm wondering if he's starting to look at Berardi. I don't know. This is my sort of speculation. It's not like based on any facts. If he's starting to look at Berardi and Wilcox and thinking, right, you're not getting this one right. One or both of you are out of the club, because it is a little bit, as you say, amateurish. And Carrick comes in, and I won't say he's on a hiding to nothing. But I just know what happens with this club. The fans are unbelievable at United, really. They're good-humoured. Obviously, they get cheesed off but they're not like a sort of bitter fan base. They're the other way around, actually. But, I've seen managers fold there just because. But, Carrick does have some experience of being on the inside. So, obviously, he was a coach under Solskjaer, and he had those 3 games unbeaten in them. But what's concerning me a little bit is that our sort of northeast correspondent, who obviously covered Carrick's Middlesbrough, wrote a piece today. I read it because I didn't see much of them, and which basically it's Louise Taylor. She said that very popular at wrestling, but tactically rigid, not very imaginative, sort of within game with substitutions, and is very wedded to a particular style of play, and sort of as I sort of said, tactically inflexible. Where have you heard that before? Amarin. So I really hope he doesn't go down that road, because he'll soon get found out. Listen, what we're describing here is an unbelievable opportunity for him. Fair play to him. He's got the sort of cojones to go in there. I really hope it works, because I did want to sit down interview with him with 2 or 3 of my colleagues. Can't remember when it was. It might have been just when he retired, actually, from United, whenever that was, 2017 or 18. A lovely guy, but so was Amarin. A lovely guy doesn't necessarily win you matches, but I think he does count for something in front of players. And he was obviously a brilliant player. I was looking up his record yet again. I think he got 5 Premier League. He won everything, I think, basically there. So, he's a heck of a United player. So I really hope that this works. I mean, what's your view on it, Shaun? Do you, if you don't have to answer this, but if you had a choice, would it be between Carrick and Ollie, who would you have gone for?
It's something that I've played forward in my head many, many times. And
it's difficult, isn't it?
It's extremely difficult. And, one of the things that you stated actually leads into that question as well. You said, if he gets Champions League football, what do they do then? Well, I mean,
yes.
that's a record that we've heard before, isn't it? That's exactly what happened with Ole.
Yes.
And I love Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I love Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I also love Michael Carrick. The two of them are tremendous servants for Manchester United Football Club, amazing players. And obviously during Solskjaer's tenure, when you had Carrick and McKenna there, I know that there's a lot of hearsay with this, but you and I both, we speak with individuals in and around the club.
Yeah,
there's more than one suggestion that while Solskjaer's reign was there, that Carrick and McKenna were the ones that were the large tactical influences.
I think they were, yes.
Yeah, they were, yeah. And Solskjaer was much more leaning towards the man management per se.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're looking at a 17-game period and a 17-game period only, as that is what I'm being told, then who do you want? Do you want an individual who can come in and put an arm around the footballers and get the best out of them by being a good buddy? Or do you want somebody who can come in and provide a little bit of tactical intelligence and maybe give them that added little bit of 1-2 on the field that can help get another 5% out of them, that can alleviate issues that are happening in the final third? So from that point, maybe you're looking at Carrick from a tactical sense. But then, as I'm saying that right now, I'm also kind of convincing myself that an arm around the shoulder during a difficult period is also not the worst time, which leads me to think that maybe the best thing that could have happened was an amalgamation of both of them, because it's an enormous task, regardless of who they bring in, whether it was an individual who has nothing got to do with Manchester United, and you say, here, take this football club for 17 games and let's get European football, while also adhering to the melting pot that is Old Trafford. So even though there is the argument to be made about the perils of bringing the tried and tested and individuals that maybe don't have what it takes for this moment in time, there's also a lot to be said about the DNA and knowing what it means and the issues of actually coming to Manchester United. We know that Carrick impressed during his face-to-face meetings and his demonstration about that he can positively impact the team tactically. But then one thing that I was also told, and I'd like to get your take on this, is a large part of the reasoning behind how he actually climbed above Solskjaer stood twofold. On one hand, I was advised about a willingness to comply with internal direction and desires during a difficult season. And then on the other, about how he has not aired a long-term plan to remain beyond an interim capacity, unlike the desire of Solskjaer. This is something, like me, that you have been heavily involved in over the past few days. From your perspective, Why do you believe that the club went away from Solskjaer? Do you think, because one thing that I've been thinking from it, was it a hesitance about recreating what is viewed as past issues from a failed hierarchy? Or was it more so about wanting to look into the summer in the catalogue of coaches who are set to be available?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff flying around about this, some which I haven't been able to verify, so I'd rather not say just because it, might not be legally sound. But um, I mean, yeah, I too have come across this idea that Solskjaer expressed a desire to be given the job full time if it's successful, but that seems to me a little bit red herring. The only reason why I say this is because, okay, so what if you want the job? If they don't want to give it to him in this summer, tough sort of thing. Unless he was saying, look, part of my deal, like it's written into my contract, is if I get Champions League, for example, and at the time, because you were still in the FA Cup at the time, um, you know, or win that, you have to give the job. Well, that's different. But I don't, it's, it's up to them what they do. So I couldn't believe it'd be that.
Let me ask you something. Let me lay it out clear. There's an awful lot of speculation and hearsay regarding Jason Wilcox and what he is doing above the manager. Now, I'm not looking to put you in an awkward position.
Yeah, sure.
But one thing that's been put to me is maybe there was a sense of being more happy to go along with the internal desires of boardroom level per se. And that was one thing that steered an awful lot in the favour of Carrick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay. So something that came out, when Amarin was sacked, how can I put this? People were telling me that there's no way ever that the structure will ever, the manager or the whatever you want to call it, the head coach will ever outrank the sort of structure, basically, which is Wilcox in essence. Yeah, no way, never. This is before and after he got sacked, right? So if Solskjaer's gone in there and sort of said, well, I've got 17 games plus the FA Cup at the time, of course, or during the process anyway. I don't want any. I just, I wrote a biography of Solskjaer. Right? I know what he's like a little bit because, it took me about a year and a half to sort of research him. I can't believe he went in there and said, "Listen, it's got to be my way or the highway." I just don't think because it's only 17 games anyway. I would be surprised, especially after you've seen what happened with Amarin, right? Because there was only one winner there, which obviously wasn't Amarin; it was Wilcox. So I'd be surprised if he's done that. There is a school of thought, and I can say this, that United weren't particularly happy with, let's say, his camp briefing as the process sort of developed. I can put it that way, yes. Now, I'm not saying he didn't get the job for that. It seemed particularly petty because, in a way, if you just sort of zoom out a little bit, if someone is the outstanding candidate, then you sort of take a warts and all, right? So at the time, Mourinho's a good example. At the time, 2016, everyone knows what Jose's like. But we'll still have him because it's Jose Mourinho, and obviously that kind of backfired. Although he did win you 2 trophies and get you to the FA Cup final, so it wasn't a complete disaster. So, to go back to the original question, I just think that maybe they came out thinking Carrick is more forward thinking in terms of his ideas about the pitch. The team, on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? And maybe what you said then. Maybe it sounds a little bit derogatory, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's a bit more of a vibes man. But what I was going to say was very interesting, wasn't it? And I'm pretty sure this is correct. Carrick, if it'd been given to Solskjaer, Carrick would have been offered to be his assistant, and I think Carrick was open to that. Now I'm pretty sure, Ineos, Wilcox and Barada, they must have known that, and so that then brings me to, I'd love to be asked one or both of them. Listen, were you aware of that? And if so, did you not think the dream ticket? Because it combines what you were saying, Shaun, right? You've got Ollie as the man manager and Michael Carrick as the tactics guy, if you like, the more sort of, on the training. And that would have seemed to me, for 17 games, the dream ticket. But it is interesting because at the start of this whole process, my thinking was, why would you contact Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, right? Considering everything you know about him, right? The fact that he had a great interim period, was it 19 games, won 14? I think he lost 2 or something. Took you to third, took you to second, Europa League final 2021. You lost it, I know, and then I think 2 or 3 cup semi-finals. Why would why would you contact him unless he's not who you want? I just didn't quite understand that. So obviously, that's why he was a favourite. And I think, the interview process, whatever's been said in there, I think, and I can only go back to this because it's a 17-game thing and it's a sort of, not a quick, well, it is a sort of quick fix. they must have come out of that thinking it's got to be Carrick just because we feel we're going to win more points under him. It has to be that. So all this other stuff feels a bit like it's sort of noise around it. If it's, listen, I might be wrong. I don't know this for a fact, but they're in a bit of a hole, aren't they, as we're talking about? Particularly Wilcox and Barada. This has to work. They have to finish in Europe after this. Otherwise, both of them are going to be like, if they're not popular now, particularly unpopular with a fan base. So but when you boil it down to that, it's about getting the most points from the next 17 games. What is it? 17 times 3 is what, 51, is it? Yeah, 51. So there's 51 points available. I would suggest, I don't know, I'd have to look at the league table. I haven't got it right in front of me, but you want to be getting at least 40 points, right? That would that seem reasonable? How many points you got now? Do you know? Is it 30, 20, 26, 50, maybe more actually then? To get up there for a European place, surely it has to be, or you'd like to think it's just in the end about which guy do we think is going to get us more points?
Well, you'd like to think so. I mean, one of the things that's coming out the most from it, and I know it's going to be an issue on social media anyways, people are going to speak about how underwhelming the appointment is, given the stature of Manchester United Football Club.
I hear it.
You're talking about points. There's 21 games played, United have 32 points. And
right.
It's impossible to discuss all of this and then not touch on the requirements to maintain a sense of, how do you put it, remaining hand in hand with United's DNA and obviously embracing the academy heritage that goes with playing a fearless brand of attacking football, leading on that model of if you score 2, we score 3, and then fighting until the final whistle regardless of the opposition.
Yeah.
Let me try to expand on this. Now, I'm going to try and do this as well as I can. In terms of what we can expect tactically, we now know that Gareth Southgate's former assistant in Steve Holland is going to be Carrick's number 2. And then you've got Jonathan Woodgate is going to assist by Travis Binion and Johnny Evans as part of the New Look backroom team. This is a squad that they're taking over that's out of both cup competitions, meaning United are only going to play 40 games in total this season, Jamie.
Yeah.
Now, I wrote about it after the FA Cup. The last time that the club played 40 or fewer games was over 110 years ago. And the last time that a United side exited both domestic cup competitions after their opening round was under Big Ron in 81-82.
Yeah.
Given what we know about Carrick from his, let's say his 3-game interim spell in 2021 and then his time at Borough, it's something that I was going to ask you about because I know you have ties into the Northeast like this. But from my understanding, he favours a more familiar formation than what we're known with the 3 at the back, adhering to what many believe is the United way of playing football. However, I did also hear about this desire to remain rigid with a certain philosophy and also maybe maintaining a little bit of that stubbornness that we were accustomed to at Amorim. I know a lot of supporters believe that simply shifting to this 4 at the back and that setup will alleviate the issues at the club. But I just can't help but feel that we're so far away from that. As asking you as a journalist who covers the club daily, but then has a personal footballing interest elsewhere, how do you view the footballing principles at Old Trafford today? And do you think Carrick has the capabilities to recreate the minimal requirements to appease supporters and the board expectations in just 17 games? Is it a possibility?
Well, he's obviously convinced the board, that he can. Whether he can, I don't know. I just feel... it's very interesting. When we went to Burnley, and it was obviously Fletcher's first game, I know Amorim went to one, if you like, proper 4-2-3-1 in the Newcastle match, which won 1-0. But it's very strange to see, Bruno Fernandes just one number 10 behind Sesko in the sort of, the attacking 3. And it, you're thinking crumbs, the last, whatever it was, 14 months of Amorim is sort of over. And here we are back to kind of the sort of United... the United familiar formation. Do I think he can do it? Appease the fans, and I am skeptical, just because everyone seems to go there and struggle. In terms of managers, interims, or whatever you would describe them. It is a good squad, or certainly attacking. It's a good squad. Defensively, you are a bit of a horror show. Actually, I think your goals conceded. I mean, your goals scored is up there. It's not the highest, but it's one of the highest. That's great. But so he's got to sort that out. I've got a feeling, and I don't want this to happen, but I've got a feeling this could go nosedive quite fast, because one of the issues I come back to quite a bit, Shaun, is I get that managers are obviously really important, but why they're really important is not just tactically, but it's about installing a culture whereby, in the end, the sort of top teams kind of run themselves on the pitch. They sort problems out, right? And this team, against Brighton, where was it? Just to take a latest example, You can get knocked out of the cup at home, to Brighton. I get that, of course you can, but it's just the latest kind of like. I don't know if you watched the game, but the atmosphere in there was pretty flat, because the team weren't doing much.
I
It's a good crowd in there. You know what
I
I mean?
did, and you know what was actually, I think it must have probably been within 10 seconds of the final whistle. There was an individual got in touch with me on Twitter, and they said basically about how flat it was. And
Yeah, yeah,
the main thing that stood out to them was they said that it almost mirrored some of the final games during the Eric Ten Hag tenure,
definitely,
where
definitely,
you have the football and you have no idea what to do with it in the final third.
exactly. And also the dog days of Van Gaal, dog days of Mourinho. Who was it before that? Moyes. This is what I'm saying. You know, the, for like 13 years, basically since the big man retired, Ferguson. This absolute genius. There's not been a culture there of grown up, on pitch footballers stroke team that says, right, okay, we're losing 1-0 to Brian, right? This is not good enough. X, Y, and Z, we'll find a way. And you know what I mean? It's this sort of like ever decreasing circles are sort of like a vicious circle whereby, you seem to be spiraling all the time. So last year you finished 15th. It looks like you're going to finish higher this season. Let's hope. But this season you're out of both cups. And as you say, first time that only 40 games we played since the 1914-15 season, in terms of a continual season. Obviously there's war interrupted seasons. So going back to Carrick, this is why I could see the thinking on Solskjaer, because obviously it was kind of similar. Post Mourinho, he came and gave them a shot in the arm, didn't he? Yes, and by March he was given the permanent job because he had that famous night against PSG. Rashford, I was at that game. It was pretty, great to be there. It was pretty amazing, But what we're talking about here, Shaun, is moments or sort of like bursts. There's no, and that's because I go back to the structure, which sort of that decides who the manager is, and the manager's sort of, if the structure is not right, if it's appointing the wrong coach, if it's doing X, Y, and Z, if there's like blurred lines about, that's why Amarin said it at Ellen Road. I came here to be the manager, and they're not coming to be the head coach. Sporting directors, scouting, they have to do their. It's basically saying, leave me alone. And this is an interesting debate. Why'd you pay a guy nine? If you're Ruben Amorim, right, and you've got whatever titles at Sporting Lisbon, I can't remember his exact record, but it's pretty good. Consecutive titles. I think they haven't won it for years until he arrived, etc., etc. And you've been paid 9 or 10 million. Surely you'd be scoffing at having to take instructions about the team play, etc., from Jason Wilcox, who's 1-0 as a manager or coach, right? At sort of men's level, elite level. I mean, why has he been paid all that money? And so I really think a director of football should just be more about making sure the right appointment of manager is made, and then you let that person get on with it. Yes. And in terms of transfers, if you've got a virtual culture, like, Hugo Viana walks into Manchester City because of the great culture structure he's walking into. He's one cog in a machine. He's not the guy who's having to sort out this big mess like kind of Wilcox is sort of charged with. You understand what I mean? It's all part of this problem. It's called a team game, obviously, because it is a team game. But off the pitch, the club has to be a team that works, and everyone is best in class, to use that phrase again. And there's just holes everywhere. Morale there remains not great. Ineos are not particularly liked. Although, to be fair, there's not loads of people left who sort of were there before they came in. Because he sort of made so many people redundant. And yeah, I get it. It was a bloated staff and all the rest of it. But I can't remember what the figure is, but I think to pay off Amarin Ten Hag, which is since they've been in, it's got to be, is it about 40 million or something? It might even be more. How many employees' jobs, staff jobs, would that have paid for that sum? So you can sort of see it's a mess, right? The whole thing's a mess. And that's why you go back to Amarin and now in this case, Carrick, to get any sort of good results, like get to the Europa League final. I know you lost it, but you got to the final. Or, in Carrick's case, to somehow get them up the league to sort of fourth or fifth. There'd be a heck of achievement. Every person who goes in there, first of all, listen, the person that they employ might not be the right person, the right manager, but also they're going in there against this backdrop or with this club that, I think Amarin would have known about the problems before he went in there, or he thought he knew about them. And this goes back to my point you don't really know what United's like until you're up close. But I think when he got in there, it dawned on him, oh, dear me, this is far worse than I thought. Wait a minute, I've got to listen to Wilcox. All right, I knew that before, but I didn't actually think, you know what I mean? It's this sort of whole, the sort of tail wagging the dog. I actually think, I think the manager or head coach, whatever you would call it, they have to come in and be allowed to basically buy or sell players, have the sort of final say, or at least a veto, right? It's their tactics. He actually, that conversation he had with Wilcott, sorry, with Amarin on the Friday before the Leeds game, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was after you beaten Newcastle, wasn't it? 1-0, was that right? Or was there a game in between? And you played really well 4-2-3-1, so you'd actually shown that you can be tactically flexible. So anyway, the whole thing just seems the latest mess that, you and I are reporting on, sadly for United and United fans.
Yeah, well, I think after the Newcastle game, you had Wolves, Leeds, Burnley, Brighton, if my memory serves me correct, and there was the draws, obviously.
Right, okay.
Wolves,
you took the place
Burnley.
Wolves, yeah.
Yeah, but there's something actually quite interesting that you've said there. It's about having an individual come in and have maybe, if not even have the final say on transfers, but to have a massive input on this, not only the tactics, but the playing staff that are going to be there. And that actually brings me to something that I had read about. I want to draw on a segment from your report the other day. Remember when you actually mentioned about the transfer funds that would be allocated to Michael Carrick? You name-checked Ruben Neves as a name that you had specifically referenced. This is obviously a footballer that most people will remember from his days at Wolves and the participation with the Portuguese national team. He's also good friends with Bruno Fernandes and Dalot, and at 28, I think he represents a shrewd deal if you could obtain him for a cut price fee. However, if we are looking at another appointment coming in the summer, and an individual that, by all accounts, will not have any say on whether Ruben Neves comes to the club or not, does that not further add to the pain and the woe that you're making reference to? But, I mean, outside of that, though, people listening, all the listeners, they will obviously be keen for a take on this. So what can you tell them about Mr. Neves and Manchester United?
Yeah, so he's out of contract in the summer. He costs about 20 or 30 million. There is a school of thought that he might sign a new contract and stay out there, but he is a player of interest. You need a number 6. They're also still interested in the gentleman at Brighton. Is it Belieber? Yes, Carlos Belieber. Yeah, I mean, you could sort of, go through them. It's the sort of the one point they were interested in Gallagher, but that's not Conor Gallagher. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. He might got a Villa. I think they're interested still in Wharton.
Elliot Anderson.
That's the other one I was trying to think of. Yes. Now, of all those deals that I mentioned, Neves obviously the cheapest, right? 20 to 30 million. I think that for a guy who knows the Premier League and at 28, sort of at his peak. I know he's been playing in the Saudi League or he's playing the Saudi League, but he's still an international. And, I think he could get up to speed quite quick. For me, it's a good deal. Casemiro's not going to go on forever, and it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens now with the whole Mainu, Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes thing. He's obviously going to go to number 10. So, will it be Casemiro and Mainu? Probably will be, but you do need a number 6. So, I mean, one thing I would just say is it's not necessarily changed that budget thing. So there was money there apparently for Amarin, but I do go back to the Semenyo thing where there seemed to be there seems to be a change of policy with regard to the money allocated for that. And of course, what kicked all this off is him saying this in the Christmas Eve presser to preview the Newcastle game. That's when he said this thing that I picked up on when it was the sort of pre-Leeds presser, when he sort of said, I'm now starting to realise that to play my 3-4-3, I can't remember the exact phrase, but I can't get the top players or, that I thought basically previously I would be able to get. On that day, Shaun, he also said that Kobbie Mainoo, quote, is the future of Manchester United. So on that day, that was the top story. But I said to my desk, this quote about, I'm starting to realise that I can't get the top players. This on another day, this would be the top line. So I will return to it. Yes. So something did change. But when I got asked the question yesterday about, will Carrick get some money? The answer was yes. And it's not a change of policy. If a long-term target becomes available, like a summer target essentially, becomes available in January, then we'd move for him, and that hasn't changed. But something has changed because of everything we're discussing here. So to go back to Neves, I don't know about you, but it seems like a good deal. Listen, is Ruben Neves going to propel you to the top 4 or 5? I'm not so sure, but I think it'll help. One little bright spark I've noticed, and I'm sure you have done, is Sesko scored 3 in his last 2 games. And by the way, the 2 goals, especially the second one at Burnley, were good goals. Yeah, really good goals. Technically good, yes. So if he can suddenly start scoring goals, but remember, this is, and remember it's with a coach that isn't Amaran. It was Fletcher, and then it's going to be Carrick. Then you never know. You might be. I know it's a cliche, but it might be like a new signing. Suddenly you got a centre forward because the team's functioning better. Yes, here we go. I'm glass half full here. I found a way to find the glass half full. If Carrick can come in and get Sesko going like Fletcher has. 3 goals in 2 games, as I suggest, is very good. Wow, you're going to be up there. So that's what I think. So anyway, you tell me what you think. Listen, we could have if you ask me what positions you need, Trevor, I said you need a new right back. I don't think Dallow's good enough. You probably need a new left back because while Shaw is solid, he's 30, 31. He hasn't got a burst of pace. Doesn't really create too much. You can go through the whole team, really, different positions apart from maybe the up top. But I think if you put a metaphorical revolver to my head, I would say a midfielder is what you need at this junction. So yeah, that's why I sort of wrote about Neves because I can't remember. There's other. There were other players, other positions. I think the other positions they were looking at was, of course, Semenyo, right, was going to come in. But I didn't quite get the Semenyo one right because do you really need another wide player? You've got Embuemo, you've got Cunha. At the time, it was this system, the Amarin system, so Mount could play up there. Fernandes, if you really need him. It just seemed, again, why is that money not for a central midfielder? So, again, seems muddled thinking. But, that's kind of, sadly, what you and I have become used to there, yes?
Well, I think when I look at it as a whole, what I had been reporting on for the last couple of months, the information I received was that the club was leaning very heavily towards the summer and that the ideal was to remain focused on the summer, but should an opportunity present itself in January that would not deviate away from the plans that were in the summer, that they would move towards such. I think that the thinking that came with Semenyo was his capability of playing wide, but also being able to act as like that left wing back. Kind of been able to play in that left wing back in a system.
Yes.
And he's obviously an incredibly talented
attacker. But was it a priority though at this juncture? That's what I'm getting at. I'm sure he can do that, but it felt to me, absolute anyway, who knows?
I don't think it was a priority, and also central midfield is the priority that I've been told the whole time, and that's why you're looking at Carlos Baleba, Elliot Anderson, Adam Morton. When I read what you'd said about Ruben Neves, I like Neves, he's a great player. But it seems a little bit coincidental that at a time when the supporter base is going to be up in arms over yet another managerial change, that we can say, okay, well, look, maybe we can get this guy for 20 million. And we can present a signing in January that shows that we have ambition, and it might keep them quiet for another little period of time. A lot of this stems back from a very, very frustrated supporter base. And thankfully, I am regularly inundated with many listener questions and feedback. There was quite a few that came through today over the last couple of days when I knew I was going to be speaking with you. But there is one of them that I have time to get to, and I think it's relevant. It's a question that came through. I have it here from a long-time listener, a lovely guy called Param Submaranian. Yes. And I want to put this to you. With Carrick all but confirmed, what should the succession plan be for onboarding the impending permanent head coach? There are lessons learned from the past, such as Ten Hag not wanting to consult with Ranić or Moyes doing away with Sir Alex subordinates. Should Ineos ensure that Carrick remains in the mix at the bare minimum during the initial period of the new head coach's tenure? And I think that's a fantastic question.
Well, that'd be up to the new guy, right? Whoever the new manager is. And the names, what I'm told is De Zerbi and Tuchel are kind of their I'm going to say dream two, if you like. Well, Southgate would have been in that, but Southgate's not interested in it, I don't think. So, yeah, listen, I don't think there's a yes or no answer to that. I think if a new person comes in and thinks Carrick could fit in, I don't think it's a prerequisite. And I also don't, it depends, I suppose, what Carrick's done as well. If you've ended up 4th or 5th, right, and it's not going to be him, whether you'd want to stay on having done that, if you've just been sort of cuffed aside, is a sort of slightly different question. But if the players, think about it this way, I suppose. Maybe this is why the gentleman, he's a gentleman, isn't it? Yeah, that's asking.
Yes, Bram,
yeah. If he's done really well and the players sort of love him, and he's got a great team spirit, then you'd be slightly zany not to offer him an assistant position. But as I say again, if he's done really well, I mean, for me, if he finishes fourth, let's say, I know it's a big if. Why would you not give him the job? Because you just basically rescued this absolute, I'll use a polite word, nightmare of a season, yes, to get Champions League football. I mean, why would you not? Now, the answer might be, oh, well, because it's a 17 game season for Carrick, and who knows what we'll do over the course of the whole season. But it'd be very difficult. And this is what interests me about this. And I asked the same question about Solskjaer when it looked like Solskjaer. Is part of their thinking, if he gets fourth or fifth, we'll give it to Carrick? Because if it's not, then they put themselves in a bit of a pickle, because it goes back to this thing of, if the person who takes over from Carrick bombs, then people are going to say, wait a minute, you ditched the guy who took us to fourth or fifth. I know I'm talking hypotheticals, but this is kind of what you have to do if you're in their position, right? Berardi and Wilcox, you have to chess game it or war game it through, right? If this happens, what do we do here? That's strategic, right? That's what strategy is. So it'd be interesting. Something I'm trying to find out. Is it an option? Now, I bet you the answer I get from sort of sources, well, yeah, of course it'll be an option. But what I really want to know is, would they want to give him the job if he finished fourth or fifth? And I would suggest, I don't know, you'd have to, wouldn't you? Because what that means if you're fourth or fifth is he's pulled you from, only playing 40 games, and the sort of despair of Hammering being sacked and going out to Brighton and all the rest of it. And he's built a culture there. And if, it also depends, I suppose, how you've done it. If you've done it with a really nice football, it's got like not only is it attackingly brilliant, but like you're not leaking goals. If it's an impressive thing, then, and this goes back to the Ollie thing, Shaun. I can't believe he didn't get the job because he sort of said, well, if I do well, I'd like to be considered. Because anyway, wouldn't they consider him anyway? It just seems a bit, why would you not consider a guy who's coming in basically rescued not only your season, but your own sort of like credibility as the sort of chief executive for Berardi and director of football, for Wilcox. So,
well, let me ask this, because now you mentioned Solskjaer and you've made a point about Carrick getting fourth or fifth. And Param obviously mentioned Moyes bringing in his own team. But this is a particularly valid point when you consider, say, Roy Keane's recent comments about completely removing Fergie's presence and anybody linked to him at the club. Yes. Albeit now he could have worded that a tad bit better than he did. When you have Fletcher speaking about how he first sought Fergie's blessing before accepting an interim role, out of
wasn't impressed by that.
Man, does Keane have a bit of a point in what
he was
trying to get across?
Listen, do you know what I think? Listen, it's up to Fletcher what he says and anyone else, but I promise you, I actually came out at the press conference and I said to a colleague, wow, why did he say that about, he basically said not only about football, but other stuff. Listen, it's fine if you've got someone who you really trust, but I wouldn't be saying it when you sort of try to lead, Manchester United. I wouldn't be saying it publicly. So I think I'd have a slightly different position to Keane, which would be, listen, you can love Fergie and take his advice, not rest it. Why would you not? But maybe for your own ability to sort of manage Manchester United and get the results that you want, that'll keep you in the job and keep the team up there, maybe it's not the best thing to be saying that, because the players are looking at that. And, if you've got any sort of wherewithal, might be thinking, oh, okay, so he's just sort of another person who defers to Fergie. This famous thing. Actually, my first book about United was called A Season in Red. Starts off with David Moyes, sort of in the, in what was Ferguson's office, taking over, and how he felt a bit stupid to be, because this is what he said. He felt a bit stupid to be sat in Ferguson's chair. Like, why? You've just been employed to forget about that. You've got to be your own person. So this sort of, I know Van Gaal and Mourinho weren't, but Solskjaer used to go on about it. It's all these sort of and so I can see what Keane's getting at. I mean, obviously Keane doesn't particularly like Ferguson and all the rest of it. But yeah, I was a little bit. That was the moment for me, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, it's another sort of the only thing to add to that is, if you've been managed by Ferguson and in that team, as Fletcher was, and he won a lot of stuff under Ferguson, I do get it that you're gonna, but I just think he shouldn't have said it publicly. That'd be my take on it.
I would agree with you. I mean, I have massive admiration for Fletcher. Not only as a player, but for the work that he has done since he's retired. It's been absolutely fantastic what he's doing behind the scenes. But when he felt the necessity to tell the world that he asked for Sir Alex Ferguson's blessing to take an interim role for a couple of games. You know, it screams that someone is living vicariously through somebody else, and that is not what you need.
Yeah.
Of course, right? After however long we have been speaking now, all of this matters none, Jamie, if this collection of football brains and coaches cannot get a tune out of a squad of multi-millionaires, you know?
Exactly.
And that obviously begins at home to City on Saturday. Now, as I alluded to earlier, Carrick could probably have been handed an easier return to the dugout. But then you look at the nature of results against what we've already mentioned, Brighton, Burnley, Leeds and Wolves, and you draw back on memories of games where not much was expected, such as Anfield, to see that this group often responds when least expected. We know that Carrick will have Mbeumo and Ahmad to call upon, alongside a goal-scoring Benjamin Sesko, as you've said, and the ever-dangerous Bruno Fernandes, with many curious about how Mainu will see his game time take shape, because something a lot of people have forgotten is that there was a conversation had many months ago between Carrick and Rio Ferdinand, and Rio asked Carrick about Cobby. Carrick said that he saw him more as an advanced midfielder with more space to utilise his technique, so I think that's going to be a very interesting point of view. How do you see this group responding to everything that has been and gone when they face off against Pep's men at the weekend?
Goodness knows. You're right. They do seem to get up for it. And, you know, I could see them beating City, but I could also see them losing, like quite heavily, to be honest. You just don't know. You know, I think if they concede early, which I've got a tendency to, United, get overrun, this City team is looking like, they've got Rodri back now, Shaun, do you know what I mean? And he's sort of almost like the icing on the cake, because they were doing pretty well without him. Now he's back. I could see it be a 3 or 4-0 hounding, to be honest. And I'm not hedging my bets here. I'm not saying this to sort of sit on the fence. You just don't know. What the issue is with this United team, with this set of players, is they're not consistent. Obviously, you can't rely on them. To sort of like, right, you beat Liverpool, and then the next couple of games or whatever happened afterwards, which wasn't great. That that happens, and you think, here we go again. So it's going to be very interesting. I'm obviously be at the game, for the Guardian, doing the match report, giving Carrick a grilling afterwards, etc. And I can't wait. I mean, this is it's why I'm so lucky to have this job, because there always seems to be something going on, particularly at United, and it's always so interesting. I just cannot wait. I'm really interested to see the team he puts out, as you basically mentioned there. I do think Mainu will be in it. I think it'll be Mainu and Casemiro, sorry. It'd be absolutely mad if it's not. I mean, he's obviously, as we all know, I'm not breaking any news here, he himself was a very, very slightly different, sort of more of a sort of like, I wouldn't say holding midfielder, it's more of a sort of playmate, deep lying midfielder, wasn't he? If you understand what I mean, he's sort of
kind of like Pirlo.
Around. Yes, there's the one. Yeah. I mean, and I think he was. If he'd been Spanish, he would have got into that Barcelona team. But he certainly have a good shout. That's how good he was, right? I'm not exaggerating. Really, really good player. So what I'm saying is, you should be able to appreciate a decent midfielder, right? So it'd be absolutely mad if we look at the team sheet and Ugarte and Casemiro, for example, are there, and he's on the subs bench. So, it could go either way. I mean, it's just, if I'm Pep Guardiola, what I'm saying to my team, and I know he probably will be saying this in essence, is look, they've got all their troubles, but we've got to respect them. But at the same time, look, we if we're on this properly, we can beat United, and we should be beating them. Obviously, I never said that publicly. Of course, he won't. He's like Ferguson. He's an unbelievable winner who is ruthless, who never ever ever thinks, oh, you know what, I'm going to throw it in for this game or this season. I'm not saying any other managers, but what I mean. He's absolutely dead-eyed, properly. So when I put it this way, the glass has gone half empty for United, I'm afraid. But on the other hand, if Carrick says to them, look, backs to the walls here, lads, just go out there, just do your job properly, but enjoy yourselves. You know what I mean? I trust you. Maybe that will start something. And imagine. I know it's a big imagination. Imagine if you beat City and Arsenal. How about that?
Oh, it'll be fantastic. And as a self-proclaimed lover of statistics, I am a statistics nerd. I'm actually disappointed. I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't check this, because obviously United have drawn 3 on the trot in the Premier League.
Yes.
City have also drawn 3 in
Yes,
the trot
they
in the
have.
Premier League. I wonder when the last time a Manchester derby, if ever, was contested, when both
Ooh, I
sides
like
had come
it.
in with 3 draws each. That now I'm going to have to check afterwards. But
Ooh, I might
Jamie,
nick
as
that for a match
always,
report.
yes, please do. And make sure you let them know where it came from. You know, my man, time spent with you, it is obviously great. It always is. And
Very kind.
as I have
Same.
previously spoken about, your novel, Adventures in Love, is
Yes.
a must read for anybody who fancies
It
an
is.
escape from all of this nonsense that we have to report on. How has the book been doing since it arrived in the world, and what can we expect in the future, sir?
Yeah, it's doing very well. People can still get it on Amazon. Obviously, it's there. Been received well. You know, it's a teenage romance about sort of a couple who get together, steal a load of ecstasy tablets, try and sell them at the last rave of the sort of acid house era, and escape to Ibiza forever. But obviously, other people aren't happy that's happened, and they come after them. And it seems to have struck. If people like good music, dancing, the odd drink of beer or something a bit stronger, and having fun, and sort of running away to live forever on a tropical island, it might be for them.
Absolutely. And having embraced Nancy Cools and Joy Miller, you know, this is something that everybody should really just sit by. It's a guilty pleasure, I suppose, for many. It's not an environment that I was lucky enough to have enjoyed when I was growing up, but having read through it, I wish I was. You know, I really do wish I was.
That's very kind of you. Listen, that's a really good compliment, because that says that I've done my job as a writer, which is basically to entertain. It's as simple as that.
But I actually took the decision recently, and I've had an absolutely atrocious experience with a supplier that I shall not name, because I have decided to delve back into the world of fantasy reading. You know, kind of like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. And there's this book that I came across, Magician, by Raymond E. Feist, an American. And seemingly it's the first of a 30-odd book arc in this magical world. And I think I'm waiting now 2.5 weeks for the book to arrive, and it still hasn't arrived. So
that's not great.
I am not pleased. But anyhow,
Not
at least I've
managed. About that, is there?
No, there is not. But for you, kind listener, can I ask that you like and subscribe if you are yet to do so, and if you're still here, and leave a review wherever you're listening today. Each one of them raises the profile of what we are attempting to build here at the Theatre of Red. Be sure to follow Jamie on his socials, and check out our daily content at the official Theatre of Red website, and across every single social. We are on all of them. I will be back to you next week to digest everything that happens before, during, and after. So until then, stay safe, enjoy the remainder of your week, and I'll speak to you all very soon.